Adding and subtracting polynomials is one of those fundamental skills of algebra. So if you practice lots and get comfortable with this topic, then you'll have a lot of success with algebra later on. This lesson starts off with a few definitions of algebra, and then we'll get into some examples. So it starts off with describing an algebraic term. Algebraic term is a product of numbers and or letters. If no letters are present in the term, then we refer to that term as a constant. As an example, negative 4a squared plus a minus 6. This is a group of three terms that are all connected together by addition and subtraction. The first term, which is negative 4a squared, is defined as a term because you have a number, which is negative 4, multiplied by letters, which is a squared, or in long form, it's a times a. So that's one term, and it's connected to the second term by addition. And so you would say that this is just a letter. If you want to talk about a number and a letter, then it would be 1a. And then finally, the last term is a negative 6. Notice how the operation of subtraction has been interpreted as a negative 6 for that last term. Now, that last term, by the way, has no letter in it, so we would classify it as a constant term. Now, another definition that we're going to bring in here is this number in front of each term is referred to as a coefficient. Coefficient. The second term, you can't see a number in front, but it's understood that there's a 1 in front, so its coefficient would be a positive 1. And the last term has a coefficient of negative 6. Now, there are a couple of skills that we need to bring to this lesson, and in terms of algebra, what we need to do is know how to identify like terms. When I look back at this example, these are all classified as unlike terms. Even though the first two terms have the same letter, they're classified as unlike terms because the first term has an a squared in it, whereas the second term has just an a. So we need to identify like terms. And the second skill we need to bring to this lesson is how to add and subtract integers. So once we identify like terms, we're going to collect those like terms together and then add and subtract their coefficients. So looking at the first example, we have d plus d plus d plus d. So remember that when a coefficient is not shown, it's 1d. So you have a group of 4 d's, and so if we add them together, we end up with a simplified term of 4d. Notice how the final answer is just like the terms that we collected together. The power of algebra can be illustrated here, where if you let d equal to some value like 5, then we would calculate 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. You would get the same answer if you were to go 4 times 5. Remember that 4d means 4 times d, so 4 times 5 gives you the same answer as if we were to add 5 4 times. So if you learn how to simplify or collect like terms together, you get a simpler version of it, and then it's easier to do calculations. It makes algebra and calculations more efficient. Looking at example 2, we have 3m plus 4m. They're both like terms, and so we'll collect together those two terms by adding their coefficients, and we end up with 7m. Looking now at example 3, these 4 terms are all like terms, so we'll collect them together by adding and subtracting their coefficients. So negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2, plus 12 is 10. 10 minus, remember this is 1, 10 minus 1 is 9, so we end up with 9n. And notice once again that the final answer is just like the terms that we collected together. Now moving on to example 4, notice that these are not all like terms, and so what we need to do first is identify like terms. And what I often find is a good strategy is to underline terms that are alike. And so 7x is just like this 2x, and this minus goes with that term. So this is 7x minus 2x. There's no other terms that are like those two. So when we collect those together, we end up with 5x. Then The other terms, plus y, minus 4y, minus 6y, those are all like terms. So when we collect together those terms, we end up with minus 9y. Remember that you're adding and subtracting those coefficients. Looking at example 5, the terms that are just like the 2x squared would be a plus x squared and a minus 4x squared. These other two terms are not like them because they don't have the square in their terms. So when we add and subtract the coefficients of those terms, we end up with a negative 1x squared. And in short, we can just write that as negative x squared. And then collecting together the remaining two terms, negative 4x plus 1x is a negative 3x, so we'll have minus 3x. Moving on to example 6, when you have brackets that are in the question and they're separated by addition signs, we can just drop all the brackets and rewrite the terms. So I'm just going to take one step here of removing all the brackets. So when I get to this set of brackets, I'm just going to drop the plus sign, and what I end up with is a minus a minus k. And I'll drop this plus sign and drop the brackets, so I have plus 2a minus 3k. So this term being a positive 2a, so I have a plus 2a. Now we're going to collect like terms together, and so what terms are like the 2a? Well, that would be the minus a and the plus 2a. And when I collect those terms together, I end up with a 3a. Then when I collect together the remaining terms, which are all alike, that gives me a grand total of minus 6k. Before we get to the final two examples, we'll review what it's like to subtract integers. So as a first example, negative 4 subtract negative 6. When you're subtracting integers, you can change that operation to addition, but when you do that, the sign of the term that follows must also change sign. So negative 6 becomes positive 6. And just like in the previous example, when you have addition and there's a set of brackets, you can now drop the brackets. So this becomes negative 4 plus 6, and negative 4 plus 6 is positive 2. As a second example, if we have something like 5 subtract positive 8, then once again we'll change that operation to addition, and then the sign of the term that follows also changes sign. So 8 becomes negative 8. Now we can drop the brackets so that we have 5 subtract 8, and when you do the math we get negative 3. And now we'll try something a little bit more challenging. And so we'll try this question two different ways, see two different strategies. In the first case, we'll apply bedmass rules. In other words, we'll evaluate what's inside the brackets first. So we have negative 2 subtract, and when you do 4 minus 7, you get negative 3. And the next step is we'll change the operation from subtraction to addition, and so that will change the sign of the number that follows to a positive 3. And when you do negative 2, drop the brackets, plus 3, we end up with positive 1. In the second strategy, what we'll do is we'll change this operation to an addition, and so when we do that, then whatever follows that's inside the brackets must change sign. And since we have two numbers inside the brackets, the signs of both terms will change. So in the second case, we'll change the operation from subtraction to addition, and the 4 will become a negative 4, and the minus 7 will become a plus 7. Okay, and since we have addition now, we'll drop the brackets, and so we get negative 2, drop the brackets in the addition sign, we get minus 4 plus 7. And now when you do the math, negative 2 subtract 4 is negative 6, and negative 6 plus 7 is a positive 1. So we get the same answer as we do in the first case, and we're going to apply this strategy going forward to the new algebra questions. So in example 7, notice that there is a subtraction that separates two sets of brackets. So we're basically going to use the same idea, change this operation to an addition, and that will effectively change the signs of each of those two terms. And so then we can drop the brackets. So I'm going to do both steps at the same time. That is, I'm going to change this operation to addition, change the two signs here, and drop the brackets. So we end up with 2a plus 10. This becomes an addition, which changes the signs of each of those terms. So we end up with minus 4a minus 3. So it's like we're taking this subtraction and we're changing the signs of each of those two terms. Now we're ready to collect like terms together. So we've got the 2a, which is just like the minus 4a. So when we collect them together, we're going to add and subtract their coefficients, and we end up with negative 2a. And finally, the positive 10 minus 3 gives us plus 7. And then in question number 8, we see that we have an addition here, so that means we can drop the brackets here and just continue on. But here we have a subtraction, so we're going to change that to an addition, but that will effectively change the signs of those two terms. So first step is to change this operation to addition and drop all the brackets. So we end up with negative 4t minus 1. We can drop this addition and the brackets, so we get negative 2t, or subtract 2t, plus 3. Change this sign to an addition, and so that changes the signs of those two terms to a positive 3t and a negative 6. And now we're ready to collect like terms together. If you found this video to be useful and you like the style of teaching, then please click on the like button, and also you could subscribe to this line of videos. Also, please share with your friends.